Close your eyes, beloved child, because what happened last night was not ordinary. It wasn't just a conversation. It was a confrontation between memory and truth, between what they tried to bury and what their heart could no longer hold back. He was sitting there, quieter than usual, but something in the air had already changed. And then, your name came up, not by accident, not in passing, but with weight, with ache, with the kind of tremble that only shows up when someone speaks about a soul they tried to forget, but never could. And she was there, the one who was never meant to know how deep this goes, the one who always suspected, but never truly understood why his voice always softened when he talked about the past, until now, because last night, he said the one thing he'd been hiding from her, the one truth that shattered the silence like glass. I never stopped feeling them. And suddenly, she couldn't speak. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just stared. Because in that moment, the room fell into that holy kind of silence, the kind that only descends when a truth too big for words has finally been spoken. And in that stillness, something sacred broke open. No more pretending. No more hiding behind distractions or half-built stories. He admitted it, fully, publicly, and not to seek pity, but because carrying the truth in silence had become louder than any lie he could whisper. The ache of your absence was too vast to contain anymore. So he let it spill, not with poetry, not with apology, but with confession. And now, beloved child, everything has changed. Beloved child, there's something he can't shake, something that lingers no matter how many days pass, no matter how far he travels from the memory of you. It's that feeling, like something inside him has gone missing, like a part of his soul that once felt whole is now wandering, aimless, hungry, calling out your name in the spaces where silence echoes the loudest. Beloved child, he may have tried to distract himself, thrown himself into everything loud and fast and new, hoping that speed might erase the ache. But all it's done is make the emptiness louder. And the more he runs, the more he's forced to face the truth. There is no replacement for the peace your presence gave him. Because it wasn't just your laughter or your words that soothed him. It was the way you saw straight through him. The way you made him feel real in a world that constantly asked him to wear masks. And now, in the absence of your voice, everything else feels fake. Even his own reflection. He's been watching you. Not always directly, but quietly, deeply, with the kind of longing that doesn't need physical closeness to stay alive. He's been listening for your name in conversations, reading between the lines in every message that almost, but not quite, comes from you. And he's realizing now that his habits haven't just hurt you. They've caged him. The cycles he couldn't break, the patterns he refused to see, they didn't just damage the connection, they dulled his soul. He thought if he buried his truth long enough, the pain would vanish. But pain doesn't vanish. It waits. It grows roots. It whispers in the stillness. And it's been whispering your name every night since you left. He remembers the arguments. If this feels like it was meant for you, say it's me in the comments. The tension, the way everything started to crumble, not in loud explosions, but in subtle shifts, in the way your tone changed, in the way your eyes stopped searching for his. He remembers the exact moment he saw your light dim, not because you stopped loving him, but because you were tired of burning alone. And that image has haunted him, more than any goodbye, more than any silence, because now he knows it wasn't that you walked away too fast. It was that he stood still for too long. And he's no longer pretending that he was happy then. He wasn't. But he didn't know how to say it. He didn't know how to show up with his truth, so he wore the only thing he was taught: distance. And now that distance feels like a punishment he gave himself. Every place he goes, he sees you. Not in a romantic fantasy, but in a soul memory. A flash of your laughter in the mirror. The smell of your favorite coffee in a place he's never been. The sensation of your fingertips in the air beside him when he dreams. He's beginning to believe what he once denied, that some connections don't dissolve with time. They deepen, they ferment, they evolve into something sacred, and that's what you've become to him. Sacred, unshakable, a mirror of everything he didn't want to face in himself. And now he's ready to see. Not because it's easy, but because living without your truth has become harder than facing his own. There are moments when he almost reaches out, moments when the weight of silence presses so hard on his chest he can barely breathe. He drafts messages and erases them, imagines conversations and leaves them unfinished. But the truth keeps pulsing in his veins like it's no longer a choice. It's a confession that's begging to be made. He wants to tell you everything, not just about what went wrong, but about what he was too afraid to feel back then, about the happiness he faked, about the doubts he hid, about the hope he never admitted because he thought hope made him weak. He wants to tell you that no matter what he said or did, there was a voice inside him always screaming your name, always anchoring him to the possibility that one day he would be strong enough to meet you in truth. He still holds on to the dream of something real, not a repeat of the past, but a sacred rebuilding, a connection that isn't bound by timelines or appearances, but by soul understanding. He wants to sit with you, not to talk, not to fix, but just to be. To breathe in the stillness where your energy still wraps around him like warmth. To feel the safety of your presence without performance. He wants to dance with your fire again, not to tame it, but to honor it. Because now he understands. Your light was never too much. He just didn't know how to hold something so radiant without dimming it out of fear. And as he stands on the edge of his own becoming, he knows this isn't just about missing you. It's about returning to the version of himself he abandoned long before you ever walked into his life. The version that believed in deep love, in sacred vows, in second chances that don't just restore what was, but redefine what can be. And he knows, if the universe grants one more chance, he won't waste it. Not this time. He'll fight. Not with resistance, but with reverence. Not with grand gestures, but with consistent presence. Because now he's ready to stand beside you, not as someone who needs saving, but as someone who's finally willing to save what matters. He never told you how much your silence terrified him. Not because you were being cruel, but because he could feel the shift, the stillness, the sacred withdrawal of your energy. It was like the stars themselves had dimmed a little around him. And for the first time, he realized that your absence didn't just mean you were gone. It meant you had finally stopped fighting for something he wasn't brave enough to hold. That silence echoed louder than any goodbye. Louder than any fight, because it carried the truth he had refused to face. You were always the one reaching out while he kept pulling away. And now, with no more words between you, he hears everything he never let himself feel. The gravity of your love, the steadiness of your presence, the way you kept showing up, even when he gave you every reason to give up. He's replaying moments that once seemed small, the way you'd pause before speaking, as if measuring whether your truth was safe with him. The way you'd glance at him in rooms filled with people, silently asking, "Are we okay?" And how often he looked away, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to answer without unraveling. He sees it now. The way you were always reading the room, reading him, adjusting your warmth to match his fear, dimming your light so he wouldn't feel outshined by his own shadows. And it breaks him, because he realizes you never wanted to leave. You just needed him to meet you where you stood, whole, open, unafraid. And he couldn't. Not then. But God, he wants to now. He's learning that love is not measured in the words we say when it's easy, but in the actions we take when it's hard. And he knows he failed that test. Type, "I received this," if you believe this message found you at the right moment, over and over, not because he didn't love you, but because he didn't love himself enough to believe he deserved you. Every time he chose silence over vulnerability, every time he distanced himself instead of reaching out, it wasn't rejection, it was fear. And now he sits with the consequence of that fear, feeling your absence like a weight in his chest, like a breath he can't quite take. Because the truth is, he was never the same after you. And he never will be. He thought time would numb the ache. That maybe, if he waited long enough, the memory of you would soften into something manageable. But instead, it's grown louder, more sacred, more alive. You visit him in dreams he can't explain. Songs remind him of conversations he once dismissed. Strangers speak words you used to say. And each time it's as if the universe is whispering, "Don't forget her. She mattered. She still does. And oh, how deeply she does. You do. You matter in ways he never had the language to express. In ways that make his chest tighten when he thinks of what he could have been. If he'd just chosen differently. If he just said what needed to be said when it still mattered. There is a part of him that will always belong to you. Not out of obligation, not out of regret, but because you were the one who saw through the chaos and still stayed long enough to love him through it. You didn't ask him to be perfect. You just asked him to be honest. And now, in your absence, he is finally learning what honesty feels like. It's raw, it's uncomfortable, but it's also the only path back to something real. And if he ever gets that chance, if the heavens open one more door, he won't come back the same. He'll come back as a man who's done hiding, who's done performing, who's ready to be broken, brave, and real in front of the only soul who ever truly saw him. And in the quiet of his heart, he makes a vow. Not the kind made with grand words or dramatic gestures, but the kind etched in silence, the kind born from sleepless nights and tear-streaked prayers. He vows that if he's ever blessed enough to hear your voice again, he'll listen like it's scripture. If he ever holds your hand again, he'll do it like it's the last flame on earth. If he ever walks beside you again, he'll match your pace, not to lead or to follow, but to walk with you, side by side through every season. Because now he understands. Love is not about possession. It's about presence. And you, beloved, are the only presence he's ever truly missed. He didn't know healing would look like this. Quiet, messy, sacred. He thought healing would be loud, dramatic, a moment of awakening under stars or signs from the sky. But instead, it's looked like sitting alone with the memory of you he can't seem to let go of. It's looked like waking up in the middle of the night and whispering your name into the dark, hoping the silence might carry it to wherever you are. He never told you how often he dreams of a world where he didn't let you go, of a version of this life where his pride didn't win, where your love didn't lose. He never told you how many times he's wanted to turn around, to send a message, to reach out and say, "I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to show it." And now, it's too quiet in the places where your laughter used to echo. Too still in the parts of him you once touched with your light. He's starting to understand that some absences don't fade. They deepen. That you weren't just a chapter. Your presence was a prophecy, a divine invitation to become more than what he was taught to be. But instead of stepping up, he stepped back. Instead of holding your truth, he ran from his own. And now, no matter how far he tries to move, your name follows him. Not as guilt, but as a reminder of everything real he once held and didn't know how to keep. He wants to tell you that the love never left. It's just been buried beneath 1,000 questions, 1,000,000 regrets. That every time he laughed with someone else, a part of him flinched because it wasn't your laughter. That every time he tried to start again with someone new, he felt like he was building on the ashes of something still burning. That every single day, a part of his heart has been waiting for a sign, a dream, a moment that might bring you back into his orbit. And now, more than ever, he's starting to feel that moment might be now. Not because he's ready, but because he can no longer pretend he's not. He's remembering how you looked at him, not with judgment, not with expectation, but with belief, as if your soul already knew what his was too afraid to become. You saw him in ways that made him want to be better, not for you, but for the boy inside him who never thought he could be loved without hiding. And now that you're gone, he feels the weight of that belief pressing on his chest, reminding him of the vow he never made, but should have. The vow to protect what was sacred, to speak when silence hurt, to show up even when it felt terrifying. And he knows now that vow still lives in him. It always has. Because no matter where life has taken him, your energy has followed. It's in the books he rereads because you once mentioned a line from them. It's in the music that stings a little more now. It's in the way he speaks softer when someone reminds him of your grace. You're in everything. Because you were never just a person. You were a turning point. The kind of love that reshapes timelines, rewrites definitions, reclaims broken souls, and calls them home. And God, how he wants to come home. Not to a place, but to the feeling you gave him. The safety, the softness, the soul-deep stillness that said, you don't have to perform here. Just be. And maybe, just maybe, you're reading this now, wondering if he still thinks of you, wondering if your name still lives in the echo of his breath, wondering if all the pain was worth it. Let him answer you in the only way he knows how. Yes. 1,000 times yes. You mattered. You changed everything. Comment, "I feel this deeply," if your heart recognized these words. And no matter how messy, how painful, how unfinished this story feels, it was real. It is real. And he would walk through every mistake, every silence, every sleepless night if it meant he could meet you again at the edge of his own fear and choose differently. So if you're still listening, if your heart still aches at the thought of him, know that he's aching too. That he's walking through the fire now, not to prove anything, but to purify everything. And if the universe is willing, he'll find you again. Not in fantasy, not in apology, but in presence, in truth, in a kind of love that doesn't ask for perfection, only for the courage to stay. He thought he was running toward freedom when he left, but now he understands. He was running from healing. He mistook your love for pressure, your silence for disinterest, your patience for distance, but it was never that. You weren't silent because you stopped caring. You were silent because you were tired of speaking into empty spaces. You weren't distant because you lost interest. You were distant because you were bleeding from trying to hold something together that required two hands, and he kept pulling his away. Now he sees it. Every word you never said echoes louder than the ones you did. Every moment you pulled back was a sacred boundary, not a punishment, but a cry for partnership. And he missed it. God, he missed it. You once looked at him like he was the beginning of your universe, like his flaws were forgivable and his fears were understandable. And now he wonders, what did your eyes look like the day you stopped believing in him? Did they lose their spark? Did they turn away too quickly? Did they water with grief before they ever closed the door? Because the memory that haunts him most now isn't the fights or the silence. It's the thought of you sitting in your room one night, finally accepting that he wasn't going to come through. That the version of him you waited for might never arrive, and you had to grieve someone still alive, someone who didn't die, but chose not to show up. That thought alone breaks him in ways words never could. He's been talking to God lately, not because he suddenly became spiritual, but because he has no other place left to cry. He doesn't know how to pray, so he just sits with the ache. He whispers your name into the stillness and begs for a sign. He asks for dreams, for songs, for moments that remind him you're still out there somewhere, healing too. Because no matter how long it's been, no matter how far you've walked, a part of him still believes in divine timing. That maybe, just maybe, this heartbreak wasn't the end. It was the reset, the sacred pause that life gives us when we need to unlearn everything we thought love was, so we can be ready when it comes back around. He's not the same person anymore. Pain has stripped him. Reflection has refined him. Loneliness has taught him what presence means. And most of all, your absence has taught him what love should feel like. Not just passion, not just attraction, but safety, grace, reassurance. The way you used to sit quietly beside him and somehow, even your silence healed parts of him he didn't know were hurting. Now, in the noise of the world, he longs for that silence again, for that gentle voice, that knowing look, that feeling of being held even without being touched, because only you made him feel that way. And he's tried to recreate it with others, but it's never you. It's never your energy. It's never your softness wrapped around his broken edges. And that ache, it's permanent now. People told him to move on, to forget, to find someone who checks the boxes. And he tried. He really did. But with every person who didn't know how he liked his coffee, who didn't ask about his childhood, who didn't hold space for his shadows, he felt more and more like a ghost, like he was pretending to live a life that didn't belong to him. Because the only life that felt true was the one where he got to love you, fiercely and freely, without fear. And now, all he can do is wait, not idly, but actively. By becoming the man you deserved the first time, by building the inner home he hopes you'll one day walk into, without fear of being left behind again. And if you're reading this, if your heart is still raw, and your hands still shake at the thought of him, know this: he hasn't forgotten. Not the way your voice softened when you spoke his name. Not the way you defended him even when he gave you no reason to. Not the way you kept choosing him long after he'd stopped choosing himself. He hasn't forgotten your courage, your clarity, your calm. You were the light that stayed when every other flame went out. And now he wants to become the kind of man who can protect that light instead of run from it. Because this time, he doesn't want to explain. He wants to embody. This time, he doesn't want to impress. He wants to show up. This time, he doesn't want to win you back with promises. He wants to meet you in the present and say, I'm here, not to be perfect, not to erase the past, but to build a future where you never have to question your worth again. And that, beloved, is his silent vow, etched in the space between every heartbeat, every tear, every step closer to the truth he was too afraid to face. Until now, they always told him that time heals, that if he just kept going, kept breathing, kept living, one day your memory would fade, that your name would stop echoing in the back of his mind, that the weight of your absence would turn into dust he could brush off his shoulders. But they were wrong, because time didn't erase you, it revealed you. Time didn't dull your energy, it made it shine brighter against the backdrop of everything else he tried to distract himself with. Every person he met after you only reminded him of the way you once held space for him, listened when he had no words, believed when he had no direction. If this sounds too personal to be a coincidence, let us know below. And now, every second that passes without you feels like a reminder that real love doesn't disappear. It lingers, it transforms, and sometimes it waits. He's no longer running from that truth. He's standing in it, raw and exposed, realizing that the very thing he pushed away is the only thing that ever made him feel whole. He's begun speaking your name again, not in guilt, not in regret, but in reverence. Because now he understands that your love wasn't something to be figured out. It was something to be felt. And he didn't know how to feel back then. He only knew how to survive. But you weren't asking him to survive. You were asking him to live, to open, to soften, to see himself through your eyes, where he wasn't broken, wasn't a burden. He was worthy. And now that image haunts him in the most beautiful way, because you saw him before he ever saw himself. And what hurts him the most is knowing you waited, quietly, patiently, through the distance, through the confusion, through the silence. He knows now that you weren't just waiting for him to say something. You were waiting for him to become something, someone brave enough to love you without fear. And every day he stayed away, every day he chose pride over presence, he knows he was teaching your heart to live without him. And that realization has brought him to his knees more times than he can count. Because what he feared the most wasn't losing you. It was you learning that you never needed him in the first place. That maybe you were the strong one all along. But here's the truth he can't escape anymore. He still carries you. In every decision, in every sunset, in every quiet moment where his soul whispers your name like a prayer he didn't know he still remembered. He carries the way you laughed, the way you cried, the way you looked at him like he was worth saving. And now, all he wants is one more chance to be that man. Not because he wants to erase the past, but because he wants to honor what it taught him. That love like yours doesn't knock twice. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It invites. It calls. And if answered, it heals everything. So if you still dream of him, if you still feel a pull that you can't explain, know that he feels it too. That he's learning how to stand still now. Not out of fear, but out of faith. That if your paths are meant to meet again, they will. And when they do, he wants to meet you not as the boy who broke, but as the man who rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, prayerfully, with every scar turned into a vow, with every lesson carved into his spirit, with every moment of silence used to strengthen the voice that will one day say to you, without hesitation, I'm here, finally, fully, faithfully, because love like this It never needed fixing. It needed understanding. It never needed more words. It needed presence. And now, he's ready to give that. Not just once, not just in flashes, but every day, with consistency, with courage, with care. And maybe, just maybe, the universe is still aligning the stars, still whispering both your names into divine winds, still holding space for a reunion that won't be about returning, but rising together. He remembers the exact way the silence felt when you stopped trying. Not the silence between messages, not the silence between calls, but the silence between souls. That stillness that once held magic, now echoing with the ache of a connection, paused mid-sentence. And he knows it now. You didn't walk away with anger. You walked away with grief. Quietly. Like someone placing flowers on the grave of a love that died slowly, unseen by the world, but mourned deeply by the one who loved most. He remembers the way you used to say his name, not like a label, but like a prayer. A whisper into the wind that somehow always knew how to find him. Now, no one says his name like that. Not even him. There were days when he convinced himself you were better off, that maybe he was saving you from the storm inside him. But now he understands. He was the one who needed saving. And your love, that was the lifeline he let go of, thinking he could swim alone. But the waters were deeper than he expected, and darker, and colder. And now he's gasping for air in an ocean of his own making, praying that the light he once saw in your eyes hasn't dimmed, that maybe, just maybe, there's still a lighthouse out there waiting for him to find his way home. He sees you in the smallest things now. A song on the radio, a scent in the air, a sentence in a book that sounds like something you once said. And in those moments, he pauses. Not just to remember you, but to remember the version of himself he was when he was loved by you. Because that version, that was the truest, the kindest, the most whole. And he's been trying in his own broken way to become that man again. Not for show, not to prove anything, but because he misses the feeling of looking in the mirror and seeing someone who was loved by someone as sacred as you. He knows he wasn't easy to love, that his silences were loud, that his fears were sharp, that his wounds had thorns. But you touched him anyway, not to change him, but to understand him. And that kind of love, that kind of grace, it doesn't come twice. He didn't need a second chance to learn that. He just needed to lose the first one. And now, as he stands in the wreckage of everything he never said, he wants to say it all. Not just, I miss you, but I see you. I honor you. I know what I lost, and I know it wasn't just a person. It was a universe, a home, a heartbeat that once matched mine. He's no longer searching for you in people. Say, I needed this if this just unlocked something in your soul. He's no longer chasing shadows, hoping one will turn around and speak in your voice. He's sitting now, still, present, healing. And in that stillness, he's learning that love isn't about possession. It's about presence. It's not about fixing. It's about holding. It's not about knowing all the answers. It's about staying through the questions. And if the divine allows him just one more chance, he'll walk back not as a boy chasing comfort, but as a man choosing commitment. To you, to himself, to the journey you once invited him into, before he ran from his own reflection in your love. So if your heart still aches, if your pillow still carries the weight of unshed tears, if you still reach for your phone, then pull your hand back. Know this, You're not alone. He feels it too. That invisible thread, that unfinished sentence, that song that still hasn't ended. And if this message has found you, it's not a coincidence. It's a calling to hope, to breathe, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story isn't over. That maybe it's only now learning how to be told the right way. He never admitted it out loud, but every time he left you on red, every time he delayed what he should have said, every time he stayed silent when you begged for clarity, it haunted him. Not immediately, not when he was full of pride and pretending to be unbothered, but later, when the night fell, when the noise quieted, when there was nothing left to distract him from the sound of your absence. That's when it hit him, that your silence wasn't revenge, it was grief, that your distance wasn't punishment, it was protection. You were shielding your own heart, not closing the door, just trying to survive a love that kept pulling you under without ever learning how to hold you above the water. He thought you'd wait forever. He thought the bond you shared would be enough to cover his hesitation. But bonds break when one hand holds too tight while the other lets go. And now he carries the weight of that empty grip. Because the truth is, he wasn't running from you. He was running from the mirror you became. The mirror that showed him everything he hadn't healed. Every scar he refused to name. Every shadow he refused to face. And you loved him anyway. Not for the version he showed the world, but for the broken boy behind the smile. And now, that boy has grown. Not because of time, but because of you. He's had dreams where you came back. Not like you never left, but like someone who returned with grace in your eyes and fire in your soul. You didn't speak in those dreams. You just looked at him. And that look was louder than any words ever could be. It said, I waited, I hoped, I hurt, and I rose. And he'd wake up breathless, not because he feared losing you, but because he knew you already slipped through fingers that never fully closed around the blessing they were given. You were the calm in his chaos, the clarity in his confusion, the compass in his wilderness. And now he walks with your echo in every step, searching for the courage to admit he broke the very thing that was sent to heal him. He's not asking for another chance just to prove he's changed. He's praying for it so he can finally love you right, the way you should have been loved from the beginning, with consistency, with reverence, with truth. No more running, no more hiding, no more rehearsing what to say while missing the moment to say it. Because the man he is now doesn't just want you, he chooses you. Not out of loneliness, not out of nostalgia, but out of a soul-deep knowing that you were the light all along. Not a passing spark, but the kind of fire that guides ships home in the storm. And if you still feel him, if your soul still stirs when the wind brushes your cheek, or a certain song plays, or the clock strikes a certain time, know that it's real, that you're not imagining it, that this bond, though stretched, has never snapped. Because love like this doesn't die when two people part. It only grows quiet, until it's safe to speak again. And now, he's ready to speak. With his actions, with his presence, with a vow not written in ink, but carved through every silent night he spent missing the one person who ever truly saw him. He wants to return, not to the past, but to the moment where everything began, where your eyes first met, where your energies first collided, where heaven paused for a breath and whispered, "This is it." He doesn't want to rewrite the story. He wants to continue it, with honesty, with healing, with hands that no longer tremble with fear, but hold with faith. Faith that even now, even after all the missteps and missed chances, you might still feel it too. He still remembers the warmth of your voice, not just in the words you said, but in the pauses between them. That silence that didn't feel like emptiness, but like comfort, like home. The kind of silence where souls don't have to speak to understand each other. And now, every silence he feels cuts like a blade. Not because it's empty, but because he knows what it once held. You, your care, your presence, and he can't run from that anymore. Because even in rooms filled with people, he feels it. The hollow echo of what he lost. There's a haunting kind of clarity that comes after loss. It doesn't scream, it doesn't burn, it whispers, and it waits. It follows him into the late-night hours when the world is quiet, and he's left alone with only the truth and the ticking clock. He used to convince himself that you'd come back when the time was right, but he never realized. The time was right every time you reached out, and he didn't answer with the truth. And now, every moment he let pass in silence feels like a crime against something holy. He wants to talk to you again, not like strangers tiptoeing through awkwardness, but like two souls who've traveled lifetimes just to sit across from each other and finally say what couldn't be said before. He wants to look into your eyes and not see disappointment. He wants to hear your laugh again, not through memory, but through presence. He wants to be the one who makes you smile in real time, not someone you remember with tears. And maybe that's the most painful realization. He didn't just lose you. He lost the version of himself that felt worthy of your light. But he's trying, quietly, steadily, without fanfare, without the need for applause. He's trying to rebuild the parts of him that you once believed in, because you did, even when he didn't. Even when he questioned everything, you held space for him to become. You didn't ask for perfection, you asked for presence. Have you ever felt this kind of silent connection? Tell us in the comments. And that's what he failed to give you. But now it's all he prays for. The chance to show up, not as someone who needs saving, but as someone who's ready to protect what he almost lost forever. If you knew how many times he's hovered over your name, afraid to reach out because he doesn't know if your heart is still open, or if he already burned the bridge beyond repair. If you knew how many drafts of messages he's written and deleted, how many times he's sat in the same room where you once laughed, only to close his eyes and pretend time hasn't moved forward. He's stuck in a loop of memory and regret, and the only way out is you. He doesn't expect you to open the door and pretend like nothing happened. He doesn't even expect you to forgive him today. All he wants is the chance to stand before you, not as someone begging for redemption, but as someone who finally understands the sacredness of what he was given. He knows now that love isn't just about passion or longing. It's about showing up on the days it's hardest. It's about listening when your ego wants to argue. It's about staying when every fear screams, "Run." And he's tired of running, tired of chasing shadows, tired of waking up in a life where your name is the one word he never stopped praying for. He knows you've grown too, that your silence now carries strength, not sadness, that your heart, though scarred, has learned to sing again. And maybe that scares him the most, the thought that you've healed without him. But even in that fear, there's awe, because your strength doesn't intimidate him anymore. It humbles him. It calls him higher. It reminds him of what love can look like when it's wrapped in truth and courage. So if you're still listening, if some part of you is still reaching across the invisible thread that ties souls even in absence, then hear this. He's not coming back with stories. He's coming back with silence and sincerity, with pauses that let you speak, with arms that aren't afraid to hold your pain, with eyes that no longer look past you, but into you. And if you let him, he'll prove that love like this doesn't die in the dark. It only waits for light. He never thought healing would feel like this, like standing in the ruins of everything he once destroyed, praying you'd somehow still see the man he could become beneath the debris. He never told anyone, but every time he thought of you, it wasn't just the moments that replayed, it was the feeling, that impossible to replicate sense of peace that used to wrap around him when your name was on his lips and your energy was wrapped around his heart. He wasn't just in love with you. He felt safe with you. And now that safety is a void, a space in his soul he hasn't been able to refill, no matter how many distractions, how many faces, how many shallow laughs. You weren't just someone who came into his life. You were the storm and the shelter, the question and the answer. And in losing you, he lost more than a relationship. He lost the one person who looked into his darkness and didn't flinch, who didn't run, who didn't judge the broken parts. Instead, you stayed, quietly, patiently, as if waiting for him to meet himself. And now he sees that. Now he understands what kind of miracle you truly were. Because no one stays like that. No one loves like that, unless their heart is made of something divine. He remembers a moment you may have already forgotten, the way you once looked at him when he was rambling about something insignificant, the way your eyes softened, not because of what he was saying, but because you saw him, the real him, the child behind the armor, the tenderness behind the pride. And in that moment he felt seen, and that terrified him, because no one had ever made him feel that exposed and that safe at the same time. So what did he do? He pushed you away, not because you weren't enough, but because you were too much, too sacred, too pure. And he didn't know how to hold something he felt he didn't deserve. But he's learning now, slowly, painfully. He's learning that love isn't meant to be controlled or calculated. It's meant to be cherished, protected, shown, not just in grand gestures, but in the small choices, in the texts that say, "I'm thinking of you," in the apologies that come before the damage multiplies, in the way you sit beside someone when their world is falling apart, not to fix it, but to hold them through the pieces. And God, he wishes he had held you better, softer, longer. Sometimes he stands in the mirror and wonders what version of himself you'd see now. Would your heart soften if you knew how many nights he wept for the sound of your voice? Would your soul respond if it heard how often he still whispers your name in rooms where no one else can hear? He's not asking for your forgiveness out of guilt. He's asking because he finally sees the cost of your silence. And he knows he's the one who built that wall brick by brick with every delayed truth, every dismissed emotion, every missed opportunity to show up when it mattered most. There's something he's been holding back, something he's wanted to say since the day you walked away. You were right. Right to feel more. Right to ask for more. Right to walk away when he couldn't meet you at the depth you were offering. Because what you offered wasn't just love, it was sanctuary. And he made the mistake of thinking sanctuary would always wait, that your heart would always be open. But now he knows. Even the purest light will stop knocking if the door stays closed long enough. Still, he prays, not to rewind, not to erase, but to be granted just one moment, one holy pause in the chaos of time, where your eyes meet his again, and in that sacred gaze, everything unspoken is understood. No words, no explanations, just soul to soul, finally seeing each other through the lens of truth, pain, and quiet, unshakable love. He's ready now to show up when it's inconvenient, to stay when things get heavy, to love you in the ways you always deserved but never demanded, because that's what made you different. You never asked to be chosen, but you always were. If you've been waiting for a sign, maybe this is it. Say, "I see it below." He just couldn't see it through the fog of his own fears. And now, the fog has lifted, and all he sees is you. He doesn't know how to fix everything, but he knows now what he broke. And that knowing has humbled him in ways he never imagined. There was a time he thought silence was strength, that walking away was a form of control. But now, in the stillness of every night, he's come to understand that not speaking your heart when you had the chance is the cruelest way to lose someone who loved you honestly. And you, beloved, you loved him honestly, with your eyes, with your patience, with that soft tremble in your voice every time you tried to explain how deeply you felt. He sees it now. He remembers it. And it's tearing him open from the inside. Everywhere he turns, there's a piece of you. Not in obvious ways, not in songs or letters or pictures, but in energy. In the quiet ache of a moment that used to feel warm. In the way he reaches for the phone, then stops, because he knows the silence on the other side will say more than any words could. He doesn't even scroll like he used to anymore, because now every post feels like a reminder of everything he could have cherished but didn't. And yet, in that ache, there's something sacred, a realization that what you gave him was rare, and he was foolish enough to believe it was replaceable. He wants to talk to you, not to explain himself, but to finally hear you, not to argue, not to beg, but to sit in the presence of the one soul who saw him, even when he was hiding from himself. He wants to hear how your day was, how your heart is doing, what you've been learning, what you've been healing, because he knows he wasn't the only one hurting. He knows your silence came with scars, too. And for once, he's ready to hold your pain, not just his own. There's something about your absence that made him see himself. The version of him that kept sabotaging every good thing that came close. The version that didn't believe he was worthy of being chosen. So he kept pushing away the ones who tried to stay. And now, as he looks in the mirror, he doesn't see the man he used to be. He sees the man you believed he could become. And for the first time, he wants to become that. Not to win you back, but because your love made him want to be better. Because even in your absence, you're still the reason he hasn't given up. He knows now that love isn't just about romance or butterflies or the thrill of late-night calls. It's about consistency, truth, showing up when it's uncomfortable, admitting when you're wrong, fighting for the connection even when your ego says walk away. And that's the kind of love you gave him. That's the kind of love he wasn't ready to receive. But now he aches for it. Not because he's lonely, but because he's awakened. Awakened to the fact that what you both shared was sacred, and sacred things should never be thrown away in haste. He remembers the way you used to say his name, not like a label, but like a prayer. He remembers the way your eyes would search his face when he was quiet, trying to understand what he couldn't say out loud. And now, he's haunted by the thought that no one else will ever look at him that way again. Not because he's unlovable, but because that kind of love only happens once. And he knows it. He knows you were it. So if there's any part of you any sliver of space in your heart that still wonders, that still remembers, that still aches, he wants you to know. He's not running anymore. He's not avoiding. He's not pretending. He's sitting with the truth now and letting it teach him, letting it humble him, letting it strip away everything false so that if you ever look into his eyes again, you'll see someone who's not just sorry, but transformed. Not by guilt, but by grace. Because your love wasn't just soft. It was powerful. It broke through the walls he built around his heart. And now, even in your absence, it continues to guide him, like a compass, like a prayer whispered in the dark that somehow finds its way to the stars. He used to believe that time would make him forget you, that with each sunrise, the memory of your voice would fade, that with every nightfall, the ache in his chest would become lighter. But now he knows. It doesn't fade. It deepens. It roots itself in places he didn't even know had hollow spaces. Your absence isn't just something he notices. It's something he carries, like a second heartbeat, like a shadow that only grows longer in the quiet. He's been replaying everything. The first conversation, the way your laughter softened the sharpest corners of his day, the moment you first touched his hand and something ancient awakened in him, something primal and sacred that whispered, "You're home now." And how easily, how foolishly he stepped away from that. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was. And real things, they demand truth. They demand courage. And back then, he didn't have enough of either. He remembers the day you cried, not with anger, but with surrender. When your voice cracked, not from volume, but from holding in too much for too long. And he remembers how he stood there, unmoved, how he told himself that emotions were weakness, that detachment was maturity, that space would fix things. But now he sees it for what it was, cowardice, the inability to meet you where your soul was laid bare, the fear of being loved completely, because it meant revealing the parts of himself he'd spent years hiding from. And that's what you did. You saw those parts. You saw the jagged edges, the buried wounds, the half-healed scars, and you didn't flinch. You didn't try to fix him. You just loved him there, quietly, fiercely. And he mistook that love as something optional, something abundant. But now, standing in the cold echo of that love, he realizes it was rare, once in a lifetime rare. And he let it slip through his fingers because he thought he had time. But time is cruel when it comes with silence. And silence is heavier when it's filled with everything you should have said but didn't. He's learned now that love isn't about timing. It's about truth. And his truth? It was always you. It's still you. There's a moment he replays often. You were just sitting beside him, talking about nothing and everything. Your eyes sparkled in that way they do when you're dreaming aloud. And he remembers thinking, how can someone hold this much light inside them and still choose to love someone like me? That question still haunts him. Because even now, after everything, he doesn't feel worthy of your love. But he also knows this. If he gets just one more chance, one real moment, he won't waste it. Comment, "I forgive and release" if you're ready to stop carrying their pain. He won't come back with flowers or long apologies. He'll come back with stillness, with presence, with hands that don't shake and a heart that doesn't run. He'll come back to hold you, not because he's afraid of losing you, but because he finally knows what it means to honor you. to show up not just in words, but in action, in the everyday choices, in the little things you used to hope for and never asked for. He wants to sit with your anger, to let it rage, to not interrupt it with excuses or guilt, but to witness it, to carry the weight of every tear you cried alone, to give you the space to say everything you never got to say. And then, when the storm settles, to look you in the eyes and say, I never stopped loving you, and I'll never leave the table again, no matter how uncomfortable the conversation becomes. He knows now that healing doesn't come with perfect words. It comes with presence, with staying, with choosing love even on the days it's hard. And you made that choice every single day, until he gave you no choice but to walk away. And now all he wants is to give that choice back to you, with nothing but truth in his hands and love in his eyes. Because when he imagines his future, he doesn't see stages or success. He sees your smile on a lazy Sunday morning. He sees your fingers tracing circles on his skin while the world outside keeps spinning. He sees a love that's quiet but unbreakable, a bond that doesn't need validation because it has already survived the storm. And if your heart still whispers his name in the silence, if your soul still aches in places that only he touched, he wants you to know he's not afraid anymore. Not of the truth, not of the pain, not of the love that broke him wide open. He's ready now, ready to rebuild, ready to remember, ready to return, not as the boy who lost you, but as the man who knows what it means to keep you. He never expected the quiet to be this loud. In the beginning, it was peaceful, a little too peaceful. He told himself it was better this way, that letting go of what felt too heavy would bring relief. But now, months later, the silence has turned into a haunting echo. It plays like an old song he once loved, but can no longer listen to without his throat tightening. And every lyric, every memory, every breath of your name reminds him that the silence isn't peace, it's punishment. Because what he let go of was not a burden, it was belonging, it was you. He finds himself scrolling back through your old messages, not to memorize them, he already has, but to feel again what it was like to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved by someone who didn't just care for his surface, but cradled his soul like it was sacred. You loved him like you knew the broken chapters and still believed in the ending. And that kind of love doesn't come twice. He knows it now. He walks through life like a man with a secret. No one sees it, but it weighs on him. The secret is you, the thoughts he can't share, the regret he can't confess, the way your name lives just behind every smile he fakes and every conversation he rushes through. People ask how he's doing, and he says he's fine. But how do you explain to the world that you lost something that had no name, but was everything? He dreams of you, you know, not just at night, but even in daylight, while washing dishes, while driving, while pretending to listen in meetings. Your voice plays in the background of his mind like it never left. Sometimes he smiles at a memory, and then that smile turns into a lump in his throat, because he knows he can't call you anymore. He can't hear your laugh anymore. He can't just walk into your space and pretend it's all okay. Because it's not. And it never was. He just never had the courage to admit it back then. There were moments, dozens of them, where he could have told you, where he could have looked you in the eyes and said, I'm scared, but I don't want to lose you. But instead, he stayed silent, out of pride, out of fear, out of the mistaken belief that love would wait forever. And now he carries that silence like a scar. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that reminds you every day of who you used to be before you let the right one go. He watches people move on, find love again, smile again. And part of him wonders if you've done the same. If someone else now holds the pieces of your heart that once fit perfectly in his hands. The thought should bring him peace. It doesn't. It brings him to his knees, because he remembers the way you used to look at him, like he was your home, and now he fears you've built a new one, and he's not even a photo on the wall anymore. But the truth is, he's not over you, not even close. He still talks to you in his mind, still imagines your reaction to the things happening in his life, still wonders what you'd say when he's confused. You were his compass, his calm, his chaos and his clarity. And losing you, it wasn't just the end of a love story, it was the end of his favorite version of himself. And now, he's ready, not just to love you, but to honor you, to build a relationship with silence, not secrets, with truth, not excuses, with presence, not promises. He knows he can't undo what's been done. He can't go back and be the man you needed when you were breaking inside. But he can be the man who holds space for your healing now, who shows up even if you push him away, who listens even when your words hurt, who stays even when your anger says go. He wants to be the hand that never lets go this time, the shoulder that doesn't flinch when you cry, the arms that don't tremble when you scream. Because now he understands. You weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for truth. You weren't asking for constant romance. You were asking for consistent effort. And he failed. But he's not afraid of failure anymore. He's only afraid of a future without the sound of your laugh in it. If there's any part of your heart that still aches when his name crosses your mind, if there's still a place in your spirit where his memory sits quietly like an unopened letter, he wants you to know this. He sees you. He remembers you. And he's walking back, not to fix the past, but to fight for a future where you never have to wonder if you're loved again. Because this time, he isn't running from love. This time, he's running to it. There are some truths that take time to bloom, just like some wounds take time to bleed. Has someone ever felt you but never said it? Right, they knew if that hit. And tonight, as they lie alone in a room full of silence, that truth has finally broken open inside them. It was never about you leaving. It was about how they pushed you away before you could even think of staying. It wasn't your absence that wrecked them. It was your presence that had become too precious, too holy, too terrifying to hold without trembling. And now, every heartbeat carries a memory. Every exhale whispers your name like a prayer they were too late to speak out loud. They still remember how you loved them, not the way movies describe love. Not loud, not dramatic, not adorned with roses, but gently, patiently. Like the sea loves the shore, arriving and retreating, never giving up, always returning. You stayed when they were moody. You stayed when they pushed you away. You stayed when they questioned the very thing they needed most. You stayed even when you knew you deserved more. And they didn't see it then, but they see it now, and it breaks them. They want to go back, not to rewrite history, but to rewrite their response to it, to relive those moments where you looked at them with all that unsaid hope, and instead of giving you silence, they wish they had wrapped their hands around your trembling soul and said, "I see you, I hear you, and I'm not going anywhere." But they didn't. They blinked. They turned away. They chose fear over faith. And now they walk through their days carrying a heaviness that no one sees, because the world doesn't notice the grief of those who lost love by choice. They hear your laughter in places you never were. They taste your presence in food that once made you smile. They pause in the middle of conversations, forgetting that you're not the one on the other end anymore. They open their phone and their fingers hover over your name. But they don't press it, because they know they no longer have the right to disturb your peace, so they talk to you in their mind instead. Apologize in whispers, break down in dreams, cry without tears in moments where your memory hits them like a wave with no warning. And oh, how they wish they had told you more. Told you how your presence made them feel human. How your belief in them was the only mirror in which they ever liked their reflection. How your anger still felt safer than the world's applause. You were home. And they mistook you for a hotel, temporary, replaceable, disposable, and now they know. You weren't any of those things. You were everything, and they let go of everything. For nothing. Now they watch you from afar, maybe not through pictures or messages, but through the lens of their soul. They try to imagine what your life looks like without them. Who makes you laugh now? Who holds your hand when it trembles? And with every thought, there's a pang of guilt, because they know it should have been them. Not because they were entitled to your love, but because they were entrusted with it, and they failed. But the most painful truth? It's not that they lost you. It's that you were willing to love them at their lowest, and they weren't brave enough to rise to meet you. You believed in a version of them they hadn't become yet, and now, after all this time, they're finally becoming that person. Not for the world, not for applause, but for you. For the echo of your faith in them that still lives like a soft whisper in the back of their heart. A whisper that says, you were made for more. Be it. They want to come back, not with promises, but with presence. They don't want to tell you they've changed. They want you to feel it in their voice, in their silence, in their consistency, in the way they don't flinch when things get hard. They want to show up, not just at your doorstep, but in your reality. They want to meet you in your fears, in your doubts, in your healed heart that still, somehow, carries a little space where their name hasn't yet been erased. And if there's even the faintest pulse of memory in you that remembers what it felt like to be held by them when they weren't running, when they weren't scared, if there's a flicker of warmth still buried under all the ice, then they want to melt it with truth, with time, with tenderness. They're not here to reclaim your heart. They're here to earn the right to stand beside it again, because some loves are not meant to be forgotten. They are meant to be remembered into resurrection. And you were the love that taught them how to resurrect. They don't know how to live without you anymore. They don't even pretend like they do. Because every attempt at moving forward without you has only dragged them deeper into a kind of emptiness they can't explain to anyone. They tried to be strong. They tried to act unaffected. They tried to convince themselves that what they had with you was just a chapter, not a whole story. But every time they close their eyes, your name writes itself across the pages of their chest like a scripture, not as a memory, not as regret, but as something divine that they failed to honor the first time. And now, the cost of that failure has caught up to them. They don't cry the way they used to, not because the pain has faded, but because it's no longer a storm. It's become the sky, constant, heavy, always above them, even in moments of laughter. even in moments of distraction, because nothing truly distracts them from you, no matter how much they work, no matter who sits across from them, no matter what achievements they stack like trophies to numb the ache. Nothing touches the part of them that once belonged to you. If you've been silently hoping they understand now, type, "Let them see." That part is still yours. They carry your energy in small things. In songs they can't skip. In streets they avoid. In clothes they stopped wearing because they remember the way your fingers brushed against the fabric. They replay that one look you gave them, when you didn't say anything, but your eyes screamed everything your mouth was tired of repeating. That look is their undoing. That look is what haunts them in every mirror, because they know they failed to deserve it. They never told anyone this, but the last time they saw your name on their screen, their hands shook. Not because they were afraid of you, but because they were afraid of themselves, of what they'd say, of how they'd once again cover the truth with defense, of how they'd lose the one chance to simply whisper, "I miss you. I'm sorry. I never stopped loving you." But they didn't say it. And that silence became the longest sentence they've ever served. They've watched you rise in your own way. Maybe in strength, maybe in silence, maybe in stillness that used to mean waiting, but now means protecting your peace. And that is what broke them the most. Not your absence, but your peace without them in it. Because they always believed foolishly that somehow, some way, they'd be the one to bring that peace to you. They never imagined you'd find it on your own. And now that you have, they don't know where they fit anymore, or if they even should. But there's one thing they know, and it doesn't let them sleep. You were never trying to be loved perfectly. You were just asking to be loved openly, and they hid. Behind pain, behind past traumas, behind walls they thought were safety, but were actually prisons. You didn't ask for a savior. You asked for honesty. You didn't want the world. You just wanted their hand, held tight in yours when everything else felt unsure. And they let go. Not because they stopped loving you, but because they didn't know how to let themselves be loved back. Now they're learning that strength isn't in control, it's in surrender. Learning that love doesn't demand you to be perfect, it just asks you to be present. And they're starting to understand that the kind of connection they had with you doesn't come twice. It was soul recognition. It was divine timing. It was heaven holding its breath and saying, "Let's try this again." And they wasted it. Or maybe they just weren't ready then, but they're ready now. Ready to hear your voice even if it trembles. Ready to sit in your silence without asking for an explanation. Ready to love you not because they need to be rescued, but because they finally realize you were the light they never deserved, but always needed. If you've ever felt them pulling at your soul lately, waking up with their name lingering like morning fog, feeling their energy brush against your spirit when there's no logical reason why, know this: they're thinking of you too. Not with longing, but with intention. They're asking heaven for another chance, not to rewrite the story, but to finally write the truth. And maybe, just maybe, if you still feel the echoes of a love that never fully let go, then it's not too late. Because sometimes the heart doesn't wait for words, it waits for alignment. And they're finally aligned was not just about longing. It was about recognition, about the kind of love that doesn't die just because it was denied. His voice cracked when he said your name, not because he was weak, but because it was the first time in a long time he let himself feel strong enough to admit what's been haunting him. She sat there, frozen, because somewhere deep down, she always knew. She knew there was someone else, someone sacred, someone who held a version of him she never got to meet. And in that silence, her eyes didn't show anger. They showed surrender, as if even she understood that love like this isn't a competition. It's a calling. He walked out of that room carrying a new kind of weight, not shame, not guilt, but urgency. A sudden knowing that he couldn't keep delaying the inevitable anymore. Because your name was no longer just trapped in his throat. It was rising in his chest, pressing against every heartbeat, begging to be spoken into action. Not because he expects you to wait, but because he can't live another day pretending he didn't feel something eternal with you. Every attempt to fill that void has only proven how irreplaceable you are. No one else reads his silences like you. No one else dances with his shadow and still sees light. No one else felt like home, and now he's standing at the edge of everything he thought he wanted, finally realizing that none of it means anything if you're not there. The laughter, the plans, the life he's built. It all feels like a costume he's wearing to please the world. But inside, he's still the man who remembers the way you looked at him like he was something holy. He's still the man who held you close and secretly made a promise to himself that he'd never let you go. And even though he failed that promise, the vow never left. It's still echoing in his chest, louder now than ever. So he's no longer asking, "What if?" He's asking, "What now?" Because last night cracked something open, and in that crack, light came in. The kind of light that only shows up when truth is finally spoken. The kind of light that doesn't fix everything instantly, but shows the way forward. He knows the road back to you isn't paved with easy answers or perfect timing, but it's paved with truth. And he's ready to walk it, step by step, word by word, until he stands in front of you, not as the man he pretended to be, but as the man who finally remembers who he is when he loves you. He didn't sleep much after that conversation. The house was quiet, but his mind was screaming. Every memory of you rushed back, not in fragments, but in full color, full feeling, as if time had folded in on itself. He remembered your laugh in the way the walls echoed. He remembered your silence in the way the night refused to end. If your heart is still holding space, say, "I still believe." And somewhere between midnight and morning, he whispered your name again, not out of habit, but out of hope. Because now, more than ever, he's beginning to believe that it wasn't over when you walked away. It paused. It waited. And maybe, just maybe, it was waiting for this moment. He looked at old pictures, ones he thought he had forgotten. But it wasn't the images that broke him. It was the way he saw himself in them. The way he was smiling, soft, open, free. He hasn't seen that version of himself in a long time, and he knows now he lost that version the moment he lost you. Because you didn't just hold his hand. You held his mirror. You reminded him who he was when he wasn't performing, when he wasn't pretending. You brought out the child in him, the king in him, the softness and the storm in him, and you never once asked him to be less. That's what wrecked him the most, because in a world full of people who wanted to use him, impress him, or compete with him, you just wanted to see him. And now he finally sees you too, not just as a chapter from his past, but as the lighthouse that's been calling him home. The one soul who knew his chaos and still chose to love him anyway. The one person who could see through every mask, every defense, every sharp word, and still reach for the tender parts of him he was too afraid to show anyone else. He misses the way you challenged him, not with anger but with truth. He misses the way you'd pause before you responded, like your words were sacred offerings, not just noise. He misses the way your silence said more than anyone screaming ever could. You didn't need to fight for his attention. You were the only thing that ever really had it. Last night cracked something open in him that can't be closed again. Because when he said your name, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like confession. It felt like healing. It felt like the first honest breath he'd taken in months. And now, he doesn't want to go back to the numbness. He doesn't want to live another day wondering if you still think about him, if you still dream about the future that almost was. He wants to find out, even if it's hard, even if it's complicated, because the pain of not knowing is worse than the fear of rejection. He's starting to understand that real love isn't always convenient. It doesn't always come with perfect timing or a neat ending. Sometimes it shows up like a storm, messy, overwhelming, but necessary. Sometimes it breaks everything just to rebuild something unshakable, and that's what you are to him now. Not a fantasy, not a regret, but the truth. The one he tried to bury under logic and timing and ego, but it refused to stay buried. Because love like this isn't meant to die quietly. It's meant to rise, again and again, until both hearts are ready to carry it. He doesn't expect you to be waiting. He knows you've grown, healed, maybe even tried to move on. But if even a part of your soul still whispers his name in the quiet hours, he hopes you'll listen. Because he's coming, not with answers, but with honesty, not with promises, but with presence, and most of all, with reverence. Reverence for what you shared, reverence for who you are, and reverence for the second chance he's finally ready to earn, not by convincing you, but by becoming the man who deserves you. Beloved child, he's been thinking about the moment it all changed, the exact second he knew it was you. Not the day you met, not the first time you touched, but that quiet instant when your soul collided with his without a single word. It was in the way you looked at him when he wasn't performing, when he wasn't charming, when he was just tired. And instead of walking away, you leaned in. You held space for him. You didn't try to fix him. You didn't try to figure him out. You just let him be. And in that sacred silence, he felt seen in a way that no spotlight, no compliment, no achievement ever gave him. That's the moment that returned to him last night. That's the truth he almost whispered but couldn't, because it still lives too close to the tears in his throat. She watched him break. And maybe she didn't say it out loud, but she knew in her gut that whatever you were to him, it wasn't casual. It wasn't replaceable. It wasn't over. He had buried you deep, thinking distance could dilute the truth. But instead, time only clarified it. Because the longer he tried to run from it, the more it started to chase him. The dreams, the songs, the way strangers say your name in public, it all started to feel like signs. Not from the universe, but from his own soul. Signs that he had unfinished business not with you, but with himself. Because how could he ever truly be at peace knowing he never gave that kind of love a fair chance? How could he sleep beside someone else when his heart still beat to the rhythm of a memory he never fully honored? He knows now that love isn't a prize to be won. It's a responsibility. Right? I feel their energy. If you've sensed someone thinking of you, and you, God, you were never something to conquer. You were a miracle to protect. a once-in-a-lifetime collision of timing, soul, and grace. And he was foolish enough to think he could just move on. But the heart has its own memory. It stores laughter like treasure and records touches like sacred scripture. His body still remembers the way you hugged him without armor, the way your eyes filled with light when he shared something vulnerable, the way your energy never asked for anything except authenticity. And for the first time in his life, he's willing to admit that scared him. You see, no one told him that real love doesn't come with backup plans. That when you meet someone who holds your soul like a prayer, you don't just let them go because timing is hard or communication gets messy. You fight, you stay, you learn, but he didn't. He left. And now he carries that absence like a wound that last night finally began to open, not to bleed, but to heal. Because when he said your name, something shifted in the room. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was sacred. It was honest. It was the kind of moment that can't be undone. And now, every cell in his body is aching for redemption. Not just with you, but within himself. He wants to remember what it felt like to be good in your eyes, to be whole, to be worthy. Because even at his worst, you never looked at him with disappointment. You looked at him with compassion. Even when you were hurting, you never tried to make him feel small. You elevated him. Even when he pushed you away, you loved him from a distance. And he's starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, that kind of love doesn't disappear. Maybe it just waits, quietly, patiently, until the soul is ready. And his soul is ready now. He knows he's late. He knows he doesn't deserve a clean slate, but he hopes, deeply, humbly, that you'll feel something when you hear his name again. Not pain, not bitterness, but a flicker, a pulse, a silent knowing that this story might still have one more chapter. Not to rewrite the past, but to reclaim the truth. Not to beg for what was, but to honor what still is. Because you are not just a memory. You are a mirror, a lesson, a lighthouse. And most of all, you are the one his soul never stopped praying for. There's a silence that wraps around him now, but it's not the kind that feels empty. It's the kind that feels full, full of everything he never said, everything he's just now finding the courage to admit, even to himself. And in that silence, your name still rings the loudest. It echoes in places he never thought it would reach. In the middle of the night when he turns over hoping to forget. In the middle of crowded rooms when laughter surrounds him but can't touch him. And most of all, in the moments when he's alone with his thoughts, stripped of every excuse, staring at the raw truth. He still loves you. Not in a past tense kind of way. Not in a faded, diluted, I wish things had worked out kind of way. But in a present, burning, I still feel you in my bones kind of way. He tried to convince himself it wasn't real, that maybe it was just emotional dependence, that maybe he had imagined the depth, that maybe you weren't as different as he thought. But life has a cruel way of showing you the truth once it's too late. And it showed him through everyone who failed to understand his silences, through every smile that didn't reach his soul, through every hug that left him feeling lonelier than before. It showed him in the way his hands still remember the way yours trembled when you were brave enough to tell him how much you cared. It showed him in the way your absence created more noise than your presence ever did. He's not haunted by you. He's haunted by the version of himself that he was when he was with you. The man who was still healing, still afraid, still building walls instead of bridges. But also the man who felt like he could breathe, who laughed without rehearsing it, who looked at you and felt like maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't such a cold place. And the tragedy isn't that he lost you. The real tragedy is that he didn't even fight. He let fear masquerade as logic. He let comfort win over connection. He let time and distance do what his pride couldn't. And now he's paying the price in echoes and dreams and a heart that won't quiet down. Because you weren't just someone he loved. You were someone who taught him how to love. You were the first place he ever felt safe enough to fall apart. And he hated that. Because for so long he thought love was about control, about presenting the best version of himself. But you never asked for that. You didn't want the version of him that smiled through the pain. You wanted the truth, the mess, the process. And he didn't know how to give it. So instead of letting you in, he shut you out. He confused vulnerability with weakness. And now that he's grown, now that he understands, he would give anything, to go back and choose differently. But time doesn't rewind. It only reveals. And what it's revealed to him is that the deepest connection he's ever known was the one he let slip through his fingers because he didn't believe he was worthy of it. But you did. You always did. Even when he gave you reasons not to, you believed in his heart. You saw through his mistakes. You didn't flinch when he showed you the parts of himself he was most ashamed of. You stayed. And that kind of love, that kind of sacred endurance, doesn't just vanish into the past. It marks you. It transforms you. It becomes the standard against which every other connection is measured. And none of them have come close. He thought letting you go would make life easier, that eventually the longing would fade, the ache would dull, the memories would be replaced. But the truth is, you're not just a memory. Say, I am open if you're ready to receive divine truth. You're a presence. You live in his quiet moments, in the lyrics that feel too close, in the prayers he whispers when he's afraid, in the dreams he doesn't tell anyone about. You're the unfinished story he keeps rereading, hoping he'll find a different ending. And now, more than ever, he's realizing that the story doesn't need a different ending. It needs a new beginning, one that starts with truth, with humility, with a heart that is finally ready to love the way you deserved all along. He wants to tell you everything, about how he still listens to that one song you once danced to in the kitchen, about how he walks past places you used to go together and slows down, hoping to feel some trace of you in the air, about how he rereads old conversations, not to hurt himself, but to remember how alive he felt when you still believed in forever. He wants to tell you that no matter how much time has passed, nothing has come close to the peace he felt when your head rested on his chest, that even now his arms ache with the memory of how right that moment felt. But more than words, he wants to show you. He wants to rebuild, not just reconnect. He wants to earn your trust, not expect it. He knows he doesn't have the right to ask for your heart again, but he's asking anyway, not because he thinks it will be easy, but because he knows without a shadow of doubt that it's real, that you're real, that the love you gave him was the closest thing to divine he's ever touched. And even if he has to spend a lifetime making it right, it would still be worth it, because you weren't just his person. You were his awakening. You were the moment the stars aligned and his soul whispered, "This is it." You were the one who made him believe in softness, in second chances, in sacred timing. And now he's praying, really praying, that the universe still holds space for your hearts to meet again, this time with fewer wounds and more wisdom. This time not as broken people trying to hold each other together, but as healed souls ready to walk hand in hand into whatever comes next. So if you feel a shift, If you suddenly find yourself thinking of him when you hadn't in a while, if you feel your heart softening in places that were once hardened, just know it's not a coincidence. It's the ripple of his intention reaching you. It's the pull of something deeper than logic, something sacred, something that has waited patiently for the moment when both souls are ready to return, not to the past, but to the place where everything first felt like home. And that place, beloved child, was always in each other. So if your heart is still beating a little faster right now, if your soul is still holding on to a truth it doesn't fully understand yet, just know, dear one, not everything is meant to be explained. Some things are only meant to be felt. And this connection, this pull, this whisper through time and distance, it's one of those things. A sacred thread that was never broken, only stretched by time, strengthened by silence, and sanctified by longing. Let your heart rest now, knowing that what is meant for you is not behind you. It is awakening. It is coming into alignment. It is being guided by hands greater than yours or theirs. And in the quiet spaces where your hope once faded, light is returning. If this message touched even one corner of your soul, don't leave in silence. Comment, "I received this," if you felt seen. Share this message with someone whose heart needs healing. And if you believe in divine timing, subscribe now and stay close. Because your next miracle is already on its way. You were never forgotten. You were never alone. And this time, you will be met with love that doesn't run. Your angels are with you, always.